Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. Today we'll be continuing our Argument for a Race series, with today's topic being the Kingdoms of Ind. Just a heads up, all the art shown in this video is made by the CH Remix 97, and I'll leave a link to his or her Reddit in the description below. But without further ado, let's begin. The Kingdoms of Ind, also known as the Lands of a Thousand Gods, is a human nation established very early in the history of Warhammer Fantasy battles. Ind, much like the rest of Warhammer Fantasy, was inspired by our very own real world at various different points of history. And, as you could have guessed by its name and location in the Warhammer Fantasy map, Ind itself is inspired by India. Unfortunately, Ind, like many other nations in the eastern reaches of the Warhammer world, never received that much lore. They did, however, receive a decent amount of nods here and there, mostly around 7th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and a semi-decent amount of new information was given to us in the 2nd edition of the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay series. However, its canonicity is debatable. But what do we know about the Kingdoms of Ind themselves? For that, let's read out a few excerpts of lore to better understand this nation. Ind is the closest of the 3 human-populated lands of the East. It is known for exotic spices, jade and other treasures. Its rulers are wealthy and generous, living in opulent palaces surrounded by slaves and servants, and are great patrons of the arts and of Ind's many golden temples. Ind is a deeply spiritual land, with its people being strangely content to outsiders. Indeed, many merchants from all across the Warhammer world will eagerly travel there to buy rare herbs and valued spices. Though these travelers should be wary, for it can be difficult to understand the customs of the locals. In fact, doing something as simple as crossing a bridge the wrong way or eating meat can stir up the ire of the locals in some places. Travelers are advised to smile politely and nod, as locals offer up prayers to his mouse or weevil deity. You see, the people of Ind have a very large pantheon, with hundreds, if not thousands of different deities watching down upon them. The people of Ind are extremely superstitious, leaving offerings and saying prayers to their gods ceaselessly as they go about their day. Ind is a strange place. Its lands are rich and fertile, and it's not only inhabited by humans and great majestic beasts, but also a rather curious breed of beastmen who seem to be more intelligent than those that we are used to seeing around the reaches of the Warhammer world. The people of Ind even go as far as revering these beastmen, and claim to have open agreements with them, even trade and fighting alongside each other. Now essentially, all that has been explained is more or less everything that we know lore-wise about the Kingdoms of Ind, barring a few tidbits here and there. Now it is very obvious that Ind is very much, if not directly, inspired by India. There are a lot of similarities here. But does that mean that Ind should not be a playable unique race in Total War Warhammer? Honestly, in my opinion, I believe that that should not hurt the chances of Ind having the possibility of being a playable race and faction in the Total War Warhammer series. Everything in the Warhammer Fantasy world itself is inspired by many other things. Nothing really is that unique. So long as the implementation of the race itself is done well, then Ind itself could be quite a popular playable faction. And let's look at all the possible reasons why now. Firstly, we'll go geographically. Seeing as Ind is quite far off into the eastern parts of the Warhammer world, they would have a large variety of different enemies to fight. Just off the top of my head, you would obviously be dealing with Chaos Dwarfs as they neighbour you to your north, Beastmen Brayherds, Skaven Undercities under the famed Ind Temples, and lastly Dark Elf incursions, as there is lore specifically falling around Lokir Felheart that ties him to Ind in some way. So it could be, if Ind gets made into a playable race, Lokir and some other Dark Elf factions would appear as raiding parties. Sure, I've not listed that many examples, but Ind itself would not be that large in relation to some other countries in the Warhammer world. And it is speculated in lore that there might be a few vampiric covens hiding within the shadows. And even then, even with those small examples, Ind already has more or less an equal amount of races as Lustria does, Lustria itself being much larger, but suffering from the same races everywhere. In regards to lack of lore, well, this is the perfect time to actually start implementing it. Games Workshop and Creative Assembly once again could work together and flesh out a race or faction which had little to no lore whatsoever, and give it lore, units and standing armies like they always deserved. Very much so like what happened with the Vampire Coast and the Warriors of Norsca. Its armies itself would be very unique when compared to other human nations. While not much is actually known about Ind's standing armies, we can make the following assumptions. Human units in the army would vary quite drastically, between masses of slave units to more refined and elite infantry. Animals would also likely play a big part in this army. It is established in lore that animals such as elephants and tigers do roam those regions. Tigers would be an elite shock troop, and elephants themselves would have two different roles in the battlefield, either with a feral form or also having riders mounted atop of them. There is also reference to various fantastical beasts, such as lions with wings. While that might not be a lot of lore, it is important to note that sometimes just even a simple sentence can create a lot of different things. Look at the Vampire Coast, for example, which 90% of its roster was created out of thin air. I understand that everything that's already been described can be pretty much linked to any other human nation, but here is where their armies would be drastically different. We know there's agreements between the native beastmen there, various tribes of different tiger humanoids and monkey humanoids, so these can be implemented into the Ind faction too. This could be a hybrid faction between human and beastmen. Humans would act as its basic frontline form, flanked by monsters and beasts. But then what would make this army truly unique is being supported by skirmishing beastmen units, which would have a similar playstyle to the beastmen that we already know of. This army would most likely lack any forms of cavalry other than the elephant riders themselves, so fast-moving skirmishing infantry and a heavy use of monsters and beasts would probably be the best form of supplement for that. Lastly, we are aware in lore that religion plays a big part in the day-to-day life of the people of Ind. And while religion doesn't really have a notable part in the Total War Warhammer series, barring that of the mechanic for Norsca and the worship of the Chaos Gods, religion could be worked into a special mechanic for the people of Ind to give them something fairly unique. Say for example, taking the mechanics from a Total War Saga Troy. Its religion mechanic over there is fairly interesting and could play quite well in regards to Ind. Here, some gods could be established by Games Workshop and Creative Assembly. Each turn, the player could then pay tribute to one of the gods and unlock certain bonuses which would only be available to them as they worshipped that god. However, should they ever stop worshipping the god, they would then start losing the bonuses and maybe get some debuffs in terms of negatives for a certain amount of turns. Obviously, something like this would have to be expanded upon, as the one in Total War Troy is still quite bare, but still fairly unique. All it really needs is that Warhammer touch-up. Now obviously, Ind is a minor race in the Warhammer Fantasy world, and the possibility of them being added in as a playable race is really much in the air at the moment. But the reason why CA should consider races such as Ind is because of its general uniqueness. Even the third and final game of the series, the Mega Immortal Empires type campaign, is covering the whole world. It would be much better if CA started experimenting with the minor races rather than just having more Empire clones all across the area. The Warhammer Fantasy world itself is quite massive, and it would be a shame if more Empire clones were brought in. We have enough of them as it is, and in all honesty, it is still rather disappointing to see all these Empire clones anyway. But what do you guys think about the Kingdoms of Ind, and how would they be implemented into the Total War Warhammer series? Do you think there's a chance, or nothing whatsoever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion, shall we? I'm also curious if I have any viewers who are from India or Indian descent. What would you think about Ind becoming a playable faction? Especially in terms of India's folklore and so on being mixed up with fantasy elements to create something fairly unique for a fantasy world. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various different social media links such as Facebook, Instagram and Discord, where you can get in contact with the Great Book team. Also in the description section below is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Using our special link and also the special code, which is also in the description below, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A special thank you to Ryan Birch and Gibraltar LUSC for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule and VS Vasan for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you guys enough. The money earned from Patreon is going directly back into the channel, slowly upgrading little bits and bobs, just trying to get to a higher level of content for you guys. And a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing and commenting on these videos. The support has been insane lately and honestly we can't be more than excited. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.